Hello. Welcome back to the Being You Pod. Another episode with me, Bronwyn Berry. I'm a nutritional therapist and a personal trainer. I'm a very tired human. I am a sometimes solo parent, partner of a seafarer, so I take care of our 1-year-old, and sometimes I have to do that by myself. That's okay though. Anyway, you're here for Wellness Without the Waffle, and we talk about a myriad of topics from mental wellness to nutritive wellness to physical fitness wellness. Today, we're going to talk about something that impacts your wellness as a whole, and we're going to talk about it because it's trending on socials and you just need to be informed. So, you're here for the information, you're not here for the ads, you're not here for 90 minutes of a podcast that takes you 3 weeks of work commuting to listen to and then think, what did I just retain from that? Anyway, so join me for my sunny office today, and we're going to talk about genetic testing. Genetic testing is widely available direct to consumer now. Most genetic testing options are based in the US, and the rules and regulations around genetic testing, specifically D2C genetic testing, vary across the world. Much like the food regulations and the supplement regulations vary between the US and the EU, the same thing goes for D2C genetic testing. So, what are we genetic testing for? Why does it matter? Because the health gurus, and you've seen them, you know the ones I'm talking about. The health gurus are on the internet sharing how they've healed their hormones or they have optimized their genes or they have repaired this, that, or the other, and using words such as heal or reset or optimize, or I'm trying to think what else other catchy phrases I've seen. Bringing into alignment, bringing your genetics and your hormones into alignment are not the best way to say it. What I might use to describe conditions related to genetic tendencies and predispositions would be remission, much like a very common disease that we all know about, which is cancer. Anyway, D2C genetic testing is available for the average Joe Schmo to go onto a website, normally some sort of medical background website, and get your test kit ordered to your house, test your genes, and get your results. There's also genetic testing like 23andMe, where you can figure out your lineage. But the genetic testing we're going to touch on today is based around autoimmune disease. And we're going to talk about some examples of autoimmune disease and how genetic testing can play into that, how genetic testing works, what it's looking for, and also how it can genuinely help you and when to push for genetic testing in those conversations with your general healthcare provider. So, first of all, genetic testing is largely used to detect, whether early onset or detect something that's already thriving, autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease involves many gene sequences that play into immunity, autoimmunity. Autoantibodies can be already expressed before a person experiences the symptoms of actually carrying or dealing with autoimmune disease. So autoimmune disease is when the body attacks itself. And when I say the word attack, I feel like I'm stepping up onto the influencer pedestal here, but that is what we use in a more informed practice anyway. Anyone who's new here, I have a degree in nutritional science and therapeutics. So I didn't just go to school for 3 months and come out with a nutrition coaching certificate. I went for 4 years and I had a lot of clinical practice involved in that as well, with several different instances, autoimmune disease being one of them. So body is attacking itself. Autoantibodies are what's attacking, can be already expressed before actual disease symptoms show. And Autoimmunity is influenced, the pathogenesis of autoimmune disease is influenced by infection as much as it is your gut microbiota. So that's cool. Gut plays into autoimmunity. That's a different podcast for a different day. Autoimmunity is not static. You can send it into remission in some cases. There are some autoimmune conditions which can be sent into remission, and not just like, oh, I've achieved remission and now I can go back to the way that I was living. It's remission, and you are actively managing that condition of being in remission through long-term nutritive and lifestyle practices. So, autoantibodies, we've mentioned that. How do they work? Autoantibodies, let me get my notes here, can be directed against extracellular or intracellular proteins. So, autoantibodies are the thing that's attacking your body. They can attack surface level. These autoantibodies don't attack like specific things. They target cells, singular cells. Your body is made up of hundreds of millions of cells. Autoantibodies can attack on the surface of a cell. So what that can look like is it targets areas like membrane receptors, channels, or secreted molecules by the cell that it's targeting. This results in the disruption of normal functioning of critical protein or pathways. Proteins are signalers around your body too. So extracellular autoantibody mechanisms attack surface level, the actual receptor on the protein, actual receptor on the cell. So it could be, all cells have receptors because they need to be told what to do, and it's attacking the receptor of the cell itself. So the autoantibody is asking the cell receptor to send a different message to the cell itself than what the receptor is sort of expecting to receive and act on. Extracellular mechanisms are mostly manageable via medication, which feels like and sounds like a simple enough fix. Disruption of normal functioning of critical protein or pathway, whereas intracellular mechanism of autoantibody working mechanisms can cause indirect damage by immunity activation. So it's like a primary effect and a secondary effect. The primary effect is that the autoantibody actually targets something inside the cell, and then what that does is that cell signals your immune system to come into action because that cell needs help, and your immune system, your defense forces, need to come in and take over and give the cell some help and get rid of the foreign invader, which your body thinks is itself. Intracellular mechanism of action is a bit more complex. That needs a more complex dynamic for care and prolonged like symptom alleviation, blood marker improvement needed because the immune system is recruited here as well. It's not just a cell membrane receptor, it's the cell itself, and the cell has then called in the defense forces of your immune system to come in. So things need to be looked at a bit more. Things need to be looked at through a few different lenses in the case of intracellular autoantibody activity. So let's look at some examples of what this means. If you genetic testing and what it means for autoimmunity, first thing I want to look at, something very common, type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition, and it is largely researched. It's typically found in children because it's an autoimmune disease. It's not something that comes with the onset of later life and the pileup of poor health habits. That's type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is T-cell mediated destruction of insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. Your pancreas, insulin, so you'll hear insulin in your pancreas and you'll think, oh, like type 2 diabetes. Yes, but no. It's the extracellular observation of type 1 diabetes is that autoantibodies go against the secreted hormone insulin. So, like we said a moment ago, extracellular mechanism, we're targeting membrane receptors, channels, or secreted molecules by the targeted cell. So, in type 1 diabetes, the autoantibodies are targeting insulin. It's an early indicator. This is an early indicator. So, the intracellular observation is not an early indicator. Extracellular one is. Intracellular observations include intracellular targets that aren't specific to type 1 diabetes alone. So that's kind of the issue with the importance, I would say, about early intervention and genetic testing being a very helpful tool in early intervention, because you could look at something and say, okay, this could be type 1 diabetes, or this could be sclerosis. That's theoretically, but you can look at type 1 diabetes because from an intracellular standpoint, the targets are not specific to type 1 diabetes alone, because it will target anything in the interior of a cell, and anything that's in trouble in the interior of a cell can send the signal to your immune system to come to help. Another autoimmune disease to look at in this case would be something that is a bit trendy, I would say, along the lines of like the hormone healers and the hormone healers. Graves' disease. In Graves' disease, autoantibodies bind to the thyroid hormone stimulating receptor. This is THSR on the thyroid cells, and it actually upregulates levels of circulating thyroid hormones. So you do have cases where hyperthyroiditis is caused by Graves' disease. Hyperthyroiditis does not itself cause Graves' disease, but that's where Graves' disease hyperthyroiditis comes from. The attacker, the autoantibody, binds to THSR, that thyroid hormone stimulating receptor, and upregulates how much circulating thyroid hormone you have in your body. Genetic testing becomes important in cases like this because autoantibody diseases associated with extracellular antigens share the same cellular pathways as genetic mutation. So you can test genetic mutations to see, a predisposition to this condition, or you might find that much like your mother and your mother's mother and your grandmother's mother, you have a predisposition and are already showing the early onset of this autoimmunity condition. Genetic testing is also quite important because self-diagnosis of an autoimmune related thing is potentially incorrect and therefore more dangerous. So the hormone healers that are saying that they've healed themselves from Graves' disease because they were experiencing a wired but not tired feeling, the jitteriness, extreme weight loss really fast, things like that. You could be, as a Joe Schmo, sitting watching whatever you're watching on Instagram or TikTok or on Substack and saying, oh my gosh, I've got all those symptoms. I am jittery morning to night. I have lost weight recently and I definitely have Graves' disease. No, you definitely don't. You could be consuming too much caffeine. You could be not eating enough food. Try saying that 5 times fast. You could be in a really high pressure position at work and that's taking its toll. All of that could be happening and it could not be Graves' disease, but you could think, maybe I have an autoimmune condition. Don't self-diagnose. That genetic testing is available. And if you wanted to, that D2C genetic testing option is available. So let's go back to type 1 diabetes for a second. Patients show autoantibodies against their autoantigens 4 to 10 years before they actually present with the need for insulin replacement therapy. So that's why that early action, that early intervention, that preventative care is coming into play. And that's where you, as a person, can walk into your doctor's appointments more empowered. This is also a great case for asking family members about your medical health history. You might ask parents or aunts and uncles or grandparents if you're lucky enough to still have them. You might ask about general health history of those people that are directly related to you, parents, older siblings, even aunts, uncles, grandparents would be really helpful to know about because they're the first line of kind of supporting if you're suspecting that you might have an autoimmune situation going on. You want to get that genetic testing done. You want to get it done properly because at the end of the day, it's not free. It does cost money to get it done properly and get it done thoroughly. You want to know, okay, these people, like my mom had Graves' disease. And ironically enough, my aunt has Graves' disease too. My grandmother didn't have it. I wonder if any great grandparents or great aunts or uncles had it. Things like that. It's the same with autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and systemic sclerosis. You will show autoantibodies against your autoantigens a good few years, up to 10, before you actually present with the need for intervention and care of those symptoms and that condition. So here's what you're going to do. If you're considering genetic testing for anything, autoimmunity, even genetic testing can actually help with cases of detecting whether you will be susceptible to any metabolic conditions, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, cancers, neurological diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, cardiovascular conditions to be aware of. Genetic testing can be really helpful there. There are a few conditions that your general healthcare provider might ask you to be meeting before you can be referred for genetic testing. And at the end of the day, like I said, you can always order a test kit to yourself and your home, or you can ask around and see if a nutritional therapist or a dietitian would be able to help you get a testing kit, because you really do think that some things are adding up well and you need to see what's going on. Right. Most D2C testing is US originated. Just say that. In the US, current health-related D2C genetic tests are not recognized for diagnostic purposes. What does that mean? If you go to your doctor and say, hey, I ordered a kit from XYZ, I took the test, this is what it's showing, can we be a bit more thorough here? That would be met with probably some pushback of, well, why did you do that? You don't have any pre-existing tendencies or health conditions that would warrant that kind of test. That's when you might bring in, well, my family health history. My mom had this, my aunt had this, my great aunt had this. And so I feel like this. You bring in your symptoms. I've been experiencing these symptoms and I've been experiencing these symptoms for X amount of time. You bring in any recent or relevant blood work that you've had done. My bloods from 3 months ago look like this. Is there a way that we can rule this out? And of course, as a patient, you have to be willing to pay. But at the end of the day, too, your general healthcare provider has to be willing to refer. And it is absolutely within your rights as a patient to get a second opinion. Okay. Genetic testing, if you're seeking medical information, do you have a history of the family? Do you have a family history of the disease? Yes, you'd most likely be referred to genetics pretty swiftly. Not in an emergency, we need this tested now, but just the referral would go through quite easily. Whereas if you're seeking medical information and you don't have a family health history of what you're looking for, your general healthcare provider might be a bit more hesitant or might suggest exploring other options first before going for that genetic testing referral. If you're seeking medical information To test or screen for a condition, you'd be considering diagnostic testing and it would be self-paid. There are not too many cases where genetic testing is not self-paid. And to be honest, I wouldn't be able to give you a specific example right this second of when genetic testing would not be self-paid. Genetic testing can be part of a complex form of care, like in the case of cancer. That might be a situation where genetic testing is not self-paid. But if you are suspecting that you might have a medical condition or you might be developing a medical condition down the line in your life, that genetic testing is often taken on as a self-expense. So for medical purposes, if you don't have a family history of the disease, your healthcare provider probably is not going to be willing to refer you to genetics. And as someone who's ordering a D2C kit, I wouldn't suggest ordering that kit if you don't have a family history of the disease, because genes, your gene expression, your genes are made up from the people who came before you, your parents, your parents' parents. Your gene pools are intertwined in that fashion. So ordering a genetic test in a situation where you don't have a family health history of what you're looking for does seem kind of silly, and you can think about it as a normal person with no medical background and put two and two together yourself of, yeah, might be kind of crazy. Whereas if you do have a family health history and you feel like you're experiencing some symptoms that are new, maybe not necessarily new and alarming, but new and just annoying, a DTC kit, a D2C kit might be really helpful. So genetic testing is really a really great proactive measure for early intervention and early detection. And something that I'm all about, and hopefully you're all about too, is being proactive and being willing to invest in yourself in that way, being proactive, not necessarily being reactive, because being reactive can more oftentimes than not put you out of more resources over the longer term. Your finances, your time, your relationships, all of this stuff, your supplements. You could be trying sorts of supplements that are a total waste of money, but genetic testing might confirm to you, okay, yeah, not great. If you don't have a family health history of anything and you just want to see, okay, do I need to take a methylated folate supplement or not? A genetic testing kit might be an expensive way to find that out, but it's usable. You could also just have a conversation with your general healthcare provider when you're in for your next wellness checkup. If you're someone who is in the midst of managing an autoimmune condition and just starting out, I hope that you won't feel bad or worse or guilty for perhaps not being as proactive as you might have liked to have been. You might have been under financial pressure and not been able to be proactive in the way that you would have hoped to be. That's okay. Genetic testing is just one outlet for detecting early onset of autoimmune conditions, and it's also just one outlet for setting yourself up for success. If you are trying to set yourself up for success and don't want to spend the money on a testing kit, keep up with your wellness visits with your doctor. Make sure that your diet has the nutrients that it needs, along with the foods that make you feel good from an emotional and mental state. And make sure that you're moving your body in some way, shape, or form. I would definitely recommend targeted strength training as a personal trainer myself, but that is just me. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's available wherever you get your audio or your visual. We are visual on Substack and YouTube. But aside from that, you can listen on Substack, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your audio. If you'd like to hear about something specific, feel free to leave a comment on this podcast episode, message me, connect with me on Instagram at b.u, the letter U, fitnessandnutrition.com. You can also email me at info@be, the letter U, fitnessandnutrition.com. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.